Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. The penultimate slot of the conference is always one I expect a lower number of people, but thank you for your commitment this afternoon. Bore da, for those of you that speak Welsh. Yeah, I didn't think there'd be many people. There's a couple of colleagues at the back there, but that's all. But thank you very much for joining us. My name's David O'Leary. I'm the Commercial and Customer Experience Director at Transport for Wales. First of all, who knows where Wales is? Let me give you a little bit of an education. We're a small country, country of 3 million people, part of the United Kingdom. We have our own government, but we are part of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We've got a population of about 3 million people, so we're not a big country, but we are very much part of a bigger United Kingdom. So as you can see, we do play a part as a part of the United Kingdom. A very diverse geography. For those of you who have been to Wales before, Wales is a very scenic and very, very beautiful place. And I say that as an honest statement as well. It's a very beautiful country, very diverse geography with cities in the south and the north of the country, and then vast expanses of rural through it. From a transport point of view, we're very much about visitors. So we have about 100 million domestic and international visitors each year to Wales, 11 million overnight trips, 87 million day visitors, and about 1 million international visitors. So when you bear in mind that we're only a population of 3 million, that's a huge number of people visiting our country every year. From a Transport for Wales point of view, so we have about 35 million journeys on our network every year. We're not the largest network in the world, but we do provide some very key, vital transport routes through the country, both in the highly populated south and north, but also through the rural mid part of Wales as well. The other thing that's relevant to say is that obviously we're part of a national network within Great Britain, and that is really important to us as a rail operator, is thinking about how do we connect with the rest of the United Kingdom. So that connectivity is a big theme for us. And then we have about 22 different lines of route across the country, serving about 250 stations. So as you can tell, we're quite a complex little country in that we do have a lot going on for what is a relatively small place. So what are the challenges that we face in transport? Well, first of all, I'd say that everything probably in my presentation is not unique to Wales, and it's been quite reassuring over the last 3 days to hear about what you face in your networks and the challenges that you have. But from our point of view, so as I already said, very diverse customer requirements. It would be great to think that we had one type of customer, but as we all know, that's not the case. People travel with us for different reasons. Changes in the living and working habits of people in the country. So COVID has been that massive catalyst, I think, for everyone in terms of the way that we live our lives and the way that people travel around. And that has been a massive change that we've adapted to. We've seen a lot more use of the public transport network for social purposes. So leisure demand is beyond what it was pre-COVID now. However, commuter and business traffic is still very low. And again, I think that's common with a lot of what people have said. We're driving greater pace into decarbonisation. Now, decarbonisation for us in Wales is something that we are taking exceptionally seriously. I know every country does. We have our own climate change minister within government appointed specifically to make sure that we are on the right track to decarbonise the country. And of course, transport plays a massive part for us. Within Wales at the moment, the railway and public transport as a whole actually only represents about 11% of journeys are on the railway. So for us, that is a massive shift that we want to be making over the coming years, and we need to be making. At the moment, again, familiar to us all, but economic pressures on discretionary spend. Finances everywhere are tight, and inflation, particularly for us in the UK at the moment, is a big problem. So there is a lot of pressure in terms of what people will want to spend their money on going forward. And then lastly, we have a lack of integration between modes. So within Wales itself, we have a relatively good rail network. we have a good bus network, but the connectivity between the two is relatively poor. And then lastly, a largely outdated mode-centric ticketing and fares proposition, which again will be familiar to a lot of you, and I'll touch on more. So the keys for us in terms of what we need to be changing in the coming years really are summarised into four main areas. So supporting digital innovation to improve journey planning and booking, developing integrated ticketing, and improving real-time information for passengers. And for us, we've got a long journey to go on. We're quite a long way behind in terms of where we need to be, but that is a really key priority for us, is to make sure that we're giving people the tools so that they can access our network in terms of information and in terms of tickets for the future. Making fares, tickets, and timetables as simple as possible. Again, that is something that we historically have not done particularly well. We want to be making it sure that it's very easy and easy to understand how to travel on our networks and how our network works as a whole. Integrated journey planning and ticketing pathway, so making sure that we are integrating wherever we can, and again, that's been a theme that's come up throughout the conference, is how do we do that? How do we do the first mile, last mile, and everything in between? And then lastly, greater working in partnership with UK government, local authorities, transport commissioners, etc. I think one thing that is common with every rail network is actually they are very complex systems. It would be great to think that you control and do everything yourself, but that is not the reality of how the majority of networks work. And particularly for us, we need to get better at looking at how do we work with our partners to deliver the network that people deserve. So first of all, just touching on that digital innovation piece. So there's a few things that we are really focusing on at the moment to accelerate change. So the first one is creating a multimodal digital platform for travel planning and ticketing. Now, at the moment, within Wales, we have a rail ticketing platform and we have numerous bus ticketing platforms, but we don't have a single place where you can go to buy your ticket. And that's something which we're very keen to fix. We're working to develop the first pilots going live early next year, which will start to enable those systems to come together and actually enable passengers to research their journey and to buy their ticket in one go. Creating a data management system, and again, I think this is something which has come up in a number of different places during this conference, is data is so important, and how we actually manage our data, how we create data sources, is something that, again, we are working hard to do. So starting with some basic information, like at the moment, we don't have one place to go to actually look at what are the bus timetables versus the rail timetables in a certain location. So lots of work in that space. We're investing in a regional pay-as-you-go proposition for metro networks in the country. So we are hoping to get that live again early next year, but that will allow people to have a different type of ticket to travel with, and I'll touch on that in more detail in a moment. Developing our point-to-point ticket proposition for longer distance routes. Again, I'll come to this, but one of the challenges that we face is that our ticketing proposition at the moment is just outdated. It was set up for when people did a Monday morning commute at 7 o'clock in the morning, getting to work for 8, traveling home in the evening, and then maybe a trip out at the weekend. And actually, that's not how people are using our network. So we need to develop that ticketing proposition, which I'll touch on more. And then lastly, enabling our new interchange facilities with integrated digital transport information. And one of the things I've really picked up from this conference is there's a number of places, particularly around Europe, where that is being done really well, where people are integrating at hubs. And that's something we really want to work hard to improve. So touching on simplifying fares, so for certainly those of you that work part of the UK rail network will know that rail fares in the UK are very complex. They have been for a number of years. And reform is something which we're working hard to do across the whole industry. But the key for us is to move people away from using peak and off-peak tickets as much as possible and start moving towards more zonal, distance-based ticketing approaches. Now, it's not an easy journey, and I think that's going to take us several years to make that transition. But in short, we need to make sure that the ticket proposition we have for passengers is actually meeting what they need, and it's not using an old system that doesn't. Fully utilizing the technological capabilities that pay-as-you-go systems provide. So one of the benefits that I think most people will be aware of is that pay-as-you-go, where it's set up right, does give you a very rich data source. It tells you a lot more about how your passengers are actually traveling. And we want to make sure that we are using that data right to develop the fare and the ticketing products for the future and make sure that they meet the customer needs. Developing a clearer, more predictable and easier to use advanced purchase ticketing system. So as I say, we want to make sure that if people are traveling longer distance routes where maybe pay-as-you-go is not appropriate, is that we have something which is more understandable and it doesn't feel like a lottery of, am I going to be paying £10 for the journey this week or am I going to be paying 50? And then lastly, creating fares and ticket products that enable and support that multimodal ticketing product. So multimodal is something which is at the heart of what we're trying to do, trying to make sure that everything we do going forward enables people to travel across different modes to try and improve that multimodal journey. So integrated ticketing, so developing our data management systems, as I've already talked about, to better capture bus and rail route timetable and other information. Creating a new bilingual multimodal journey planning technology. So as I touched on before, Wales is a nation of two languages. Our two official languages are English and Welsh. So we need to make sure as an operator that we are providing that bilingual capability to everyone when they travel. Working with bus and rail operators to reach commercial agreements to develop new integrated ticketing products. Again, those of you familiar with the UK market will be aware that rail and bus networks are contracted and managed in very different ways. So we need to be actually creating relationships with bus operators that makes them want to be part of a system with us, and that's a key thing for us to achieve. And then lastly, developing a clear customer proposition to enable integrated ticketing, including clear branding, communication, and customer support channels. So integration is a great thing to have, but I think the one thing that most people will appreciate is that you need a lot of things behind the scenes to make that work properly in order for it to work for the customer. So those things are really important for us to actually develop. So the keys to making change happen. So greater cooperation and joint working between authorities and operators to create integrated transport systems. So that cooperation and working is there, but we need to improve it. We need to be better at wanting to grow transport as a whole together. Recognizing the mutual benefits that a growing integrated public transport system can bring to each of the component parts rather than a traditional modal approach. So rail, historically, we've just focused on rail and we've said, let's grow this. But actually, we need to be looking at public transport more holistically and saying, let's grow public transport. If we can get that right, then it wins. It's a win for all of us. And lastly, being more innovative with ticketing and fares, modernizing to meet customer needs whilst making traditional product and pricing approaches less relevant. In terms of that working in partnership piece, so engaging with UK government and Great British Railways officials to understand their plans for fares and ticketing. As I said, we're part of a wider nation, and we need to make sure that we're working closely with the rest of the nation to develop something that works across the whole country. Working with Welsh Government officials to understand and pace our plans for ticketing and fares reform to align with objectives for modal shift. So that decarbonisation agenda is something which is being pushed very hard. We need to keep up with it, and we need to make sure that we are getting ahead of that curve and getting people out of the cars and into public transport. Developing our relationships with local and regional authorities in Wales. So again, something you'll be very familiar with is that in most countries you will have local authorities as well as regional or national bodies. And those relationships are really important if the whole system is to work as well for us. And then lastly, developing new relationships with commercial bus operators to build proposals for regional integrated ticketing schemes in Wales. So we've got a huge amount to do. We're very much at the beginning of our journey, but it has been a real pleasure over the last couple of days hearing that actually our challenges are not unique. There's lots of ideas out there, and we will very much be out and about trying to steal them from you. So thank you very much in advance. Thank you for your time.
I